worked at communications. So.
Okay. I knew Lou, who was former Homeland Secretary, Lou Chirillo.
Is that a gal?
No, it's a man.
No,
He
I don't
actually was a member of the FBI at one point.
Yeah, no, I don't.
He read in the whole New York bureau. But then he came down and worked at MDNA, and then he retired with Governor Markell. And then Nate
Kimberly. How are you?
Hello, sir.
Hey, Doc.
Hey, what's up? Just down for last week. Hey, Matt. How you doing?
Good, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, take a nice little trip.
Oh, shoot.
You're first up, so once we get started.
No worries.
Here, Kim will help you.
Yep.
How you doing, all
I'm doing good. I feel much better.
The kids are about accomplish.
Oh,
right?
no, I didn't.
Yeah. I just
How are you, Mr. Angel?
Good morning, good evening.
You don't know what day it
It's
is.
been it's been a day. Bad one yesterday.
I think she was in New York or New Jersey, but she was.
Well, I'm glad you're finding stuff to keep yourself busy.
Oh, yeah.
If you
That's
run
fine.
out of projects, you can come around to South
Is
Street.
it
I
hot
have
in here,
plenty.
Terry?
I am teaching myself how to 3D
I don't think so.
model.
Yeah?
So I can get on the
You're running
computer
hot
and
anyhow.
create my own 3D models that I can print.
Not on a day like today.
Oh, okay.
What, I get fired? Nobody told me?
How's this work?
Jeffrey,
Well,
I know you admire
it's your
me.
military
Come on
left.
in. See, gee,
Felt like
you
channeling
can
a
have it
Republican on
11 months.
Good evening, sir.
You gotta come these off, do it more
7
often.
o'clock.
You can have it in 11 months or just wait.
Whichever comes first.
7 o'clock is the magic time. Just for information.
Welcome to Kent County Levy Court Committee meetings. This evening, Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. We're on Levy Court Chamber Room 203 at 555 Bay Road in Dover, Delaware. Before we proceed with the committee meetings, I'll turn it over to the county administrator to explain how this works via phone or the internet.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a committee meeting of Levy Court, and as such, we will be following the adopted rules of procedure for committee meetings tonight. And we are offering this meeting in person here at 555 Bay Road, as well as via WebEx platform. And for those who may be joining us via WebEx, you will note that throughout the agenda, at the end of each committee, there's an opportunity for public comment. And if you're a member of the public on WebEx and you wish to address Levy Court, I will ask that at the appropriate time we'll remind you of the instructions. But if you're on a phone, a mobile phone, *3 will raise an electronic hand, and our operator will be able to see you, and we will bring you into the room. If you're on a computer via WebEx, you'll similarly activate the raise hand icon on your screen, and we'll be able to bring you into the room. It's your call whether you use the video or not. If you're on a computer, that's up to the operator on the other end, but we will certainly be able to hear you in the meeting room here. This is a committee meeting, so comments are merely statements that you wish to make. This is not a public hearing, and so we are not necessarily here to answer questions or to have a debate about any of the topics, but we do entertain comments about any of the topics that are on tonight's agenda at the conclusion of each committee. Mr. President, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time we'll open the committee meetings. We do have 7 Levy Court Commissioners present and the County Administrator. The first item on the agenda is Administration Committee. Mr. Angel, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kim and Mr. Petamaj.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Angel. I'm going to turn the floor over to Director Kim Crouch from our IT division to introduce our guest, and we'll have a dialogue with our guest.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Tonight I have Matthew Payne here with me tonight, and he is from Computer Aided, Inc. The county hired Computer Aided, Inc. to look over the proposal and contract for Tyler Technologies, the ERP system for the Munis product. And CAI assisted Newcastle County in their very successful implementation of this product. And so we felt it important that, CAI come in tonight and talk to you all about the engagement that they offer and what they can do to help us out. And they met with us in December and explained to us key roles that we needed for the project to keep the project on schedule and on time. And they also provided a proposed project timeline for the county to discuss and consider. But for right now, I want to turn it over to Matt. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Let's go through the agenda here. Quick agenda, just some opening remarks. Look at the project scope at a high level. The different timelines that are there. One that was proposed by our implementation partner, which is Tyler Technology. And then one that we've kind of proposed that's a little bit different than theirs. Some assumptions and risks, and some closing remarks and any questions that you have. So hopefully this will be informational. If anyone has any questions at any point, please go ahead and ask the questions, and I'll do my best. So Kim and I, and the third person, Kamla Sheth, was going to be here with me tonight, but a medical emergency with his family and is unable to attend. So just a quick background for Kamlesh. So Kamlesh and I worked together at the state of Delaware, Department of Technology. I was the chief technology officer, and he ran our ERP team for the state. So when the state implemented the statewide ERP system, which covered all the agencies plus K-12, he was the project manager, and I was the person responsible for that. I left the state 6 years ago and joined CAI. I specialize in the public sector area. So I handle the city of Philadelphia, all the state of Delaware business, Newcastle County. I also have a team that handles the state of Florida, Alabama, and Louisiana. Our company is working with 45 states. So we do a lot of government business. It's about 80% of the business that we do as a company. Kamlesh is, I would consider, an expert in the ERP space. I would not consider myself an expert in the ERP space. I think I am extremely strong in large IT projects, however, ERP being one of those, but he has much more detailed understanding specifically in the ERP space. The scope of the project. So there's a lot of components that make up Tyler. It's more than just one solution. And we'll go through some of those right here. So there's a financials component. There's the HR benefits and payroll. Then there's tax billing and collections. And those are different components that you can purchase from Tyler. When we were engaged, CAI, the county had already been out looking and looked at Tyler and had selected Tyler as the best option. That is, in fact, the same solution that Newcastle County uses, just as a point of reference. They are excellent partners. I found them to be very honest, great software, great knowledge of the business area that they support, not just the IT stuff. So really good partner. Really happy with the work they've done with us so far for Newcastle County. Some of the keys to success, executive leadership, super critical. So with any large-scale IT project, you're going to have situations where you have your people that are having to do their day-to-day work, because the county still needs to continue to run, and now you put this large project on top of that. And so from time to time, you have dialogue and decisions need to be made because sometimes people have to spend more time on the day-to-day, and that could impact the project timeline. And so there's always a healthy push and pull back and forth between the project and the regular day-to-day work that's going on. So having an executive leadership that can insert themselves from time to time and say, hey, we need to focus on this has been important for us, our success so far. End user community, so the people that are actually going to use the system, we try to have them participate throughout the project so they get familiar. We have a whole organizational change management process that we use to formalize that. But in general, the more the folks are involved in the project, the easier the adoption is at the end. And if they're really not that engaged, and all of a sudden you give them something brand new that no one's ever used before, at the very end, it's a little bit harder and takes longer for the adoption. Probably one of the most critical thing is the project team itself. So generally, when people are putting together large-scale IT, whether it's the commercial sector or the public sector, people have a tendency to do a pretty good job saying this is what we need to do from an IT perspective. But a lot of times they underestimate the business side and how many functional business people need to participate in what they need to do to make the project be successful. And being successful doesn't just mean I installed it, but it means it's giving you everything it's supposed to have given you, it's usable, and it makes the performance of the county better. That's success, not just getting it done and not have it blow up. You want to get what you paid for. So having those folks part of the project is critical. The good thing with Tyler is their packages comes with industry best solution. So basically all the workflow and all the things that government needs pretty much comes with Tyler, which is why Newcastle selected him, and I think that's the same reason that Kent was selecting him as well. Keys to success in other words, just the timeline and the sense of urgency. Once we put a timeline together, everybody has to work towards that and make all the interim deliverables. If you miss, then your partner's going to come back, Tyler in this case, and say, well, it's going to take longer, and therefore it costs us more money to keep our people, so therefore we're going to charge you more. So when you kind of make a commitment, you got to make sure you've got a plan that you can live with, that you can be successful with, that you have enough people to kind of manage to. Some of the other bullets are similar in terms of time decisions. Change management, I can talk to that a little bit later, but that's really all about adoption. Go ahead.
Matt, excuse me, will there be a dashboard that we can follow that kind of has the who, what, where, when, and timeframes so that we can look at it at any given time?
Yes.
And know whether or not we're on track or
So what we
running behind?
usually do, great question. What we usually do is when we set up a project governance, we do an executive steering committee, which I'm assuming, I don't know, but I would assuming you would be part of that. And so that's usually a once a month where we come in and we kind of give an overview to say, okay, this is red, yellow, green status, all the different components, where we are relative to the timeline, where the financial piece is, where the overall health of the project is. We also do a weekly status on everything that can be distributed. I don't know traditionally how that works with this organization, whether you are used to getting those, whether that would be something new, I don't know. But we traditionally publish one every week so the people that are involved at the more senior level get a chance to look at that. Change management, again, I can talk to that a little bit later, but at the end of the day, that's all about the adoption factor. Can the people use the tool that is being implemented? And then participation of the subject matter experts. This is one of the more difficult things because organizations have a tendency to not have a lot of backup. And everybody goes to the same people who are the most knowledgeable people that we're referring to as the subject matter experts. And so we may need them to help on the project, but they may also be needed on some of the day-to-day things. So kind of having enough of those people and learning to work with them and manage to their schedule is also critical. Next slide's the timeline. So when we were engaged, Tyler had already proposed a timeline for the project. And similar to what happened in Newcastle County, it's a pretty aggressive timeline with a lot of overlaps. So each of those packages, you can see finance, payroll, HR, those are all separate functions within the solution that could be put in by themselves or in a group. We didn't like the timeline because we thought it was just too much overlap. We thought, based on conversations with Kim and a few others, that the speed of that was going to be too much for the county to handle, that we didn't have enough resources to do that. So we proposed a different timeline that spread out a little bit longer, not too terribly different than what we did in Newcastle County. Kind of walked through that with Kim and some of the other folks as well already. So as you can kind of see, there's a bit of a difference between the two of them. You can always go faster. So if you kind of reach an agreement and you sign a contract, it's going to have a timeline. If you find out that the pace of the project you're actually able to meet or do better, you could always negotiate to speed that up. But going in the other direction, they're going to ask for more money and more time if you elongate it. So I would always say, make sure whenever agreement you decide to do on any of your big initiatives, that you're very confident in the timeline that you can get it done with the people that you have available. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Thanks, Mr. Payne. So of the two timelines, obviously yours is considerably longer.
Yes.
Who wins in that scenario? Because Tyler has proposed this, won the bid based on their proposal. Who
So-
wins in that scenario?
Who manages it, is the question?
Well, somebody, either Tyler or
Yeah, so the
CAI.
way the organization sets up generally is, so Tyler will have a lead person, a lead project manager. That'd be the contact for the project. So this is after the timeline is agreed upon. So just to go through the mechanics, there'd be a project manager representing the county that would have a counterpart from Tyler that would be working through the timeline and measuring to it. Before you sign a contract, which you've not signed a contract yet, there would be a dialogue with Tyler to say, no, this is kind of what we feel more comfortable. And again, we had a similar conversation with them, with Newcastle County, so it's not something unusual that they're not used to. They propose something and then people can say, yes, we're in agreement with that, or no, that's not going to work for us, it's too fast, it's too short. So whether you wanted us to help you with that, we could do that. We certainly did that for Newcastle County. If your folks wanted to handle that negotiation, you could certainly do that as well. We could help you with that. You could do that by yourself, whatever works best for you. But after it's settled, then it gets managed by a combination of the Tyler lead and the county lead.
And CAI is just reviewing this and then CAI goes away? Or is CAI here for the,
Depends on whatever the county wants. So right now, we're only brought in have one person just to review everything.
Right.
If you want to engage us to help run it, that's a whole different discussion.
If I could address that. Right now, as Matt just mentioned, we're in a contract for assistance in negotiating and finalizing this Tyler agreement. We envision continuing with CAI as a project management consultant through the entirety of the implementation process, because we're looking at them for project management and also change management services. Aside from Tyler, they'll be the intermediary in helping line up our resources with Tyler work schedule and helping us through that whole process. So that's our objective.
all right, thanks.
Before you move from that slide, I just want to make a few comments. What Matt said, that he reviewed this with us. We did have a few discussions. We did not go in detail of all of the timeline, other than I introduced the reassessment project. And I felt it was very important to bring the tax module forward because of the reassessment project. And we will need to have a new tax system, or we will need to identify how we're going to do our tax. So that's pretty much was our input into their proposed schedule. The things that are in red that may have been pushed out were just their recommendation, but we have not talked about that internally. And we have not, really had a chance to discuss this and come up with what we feel that a good proposed timeline would be. So I just wanted to add that.
I think to do that in a way that everybody would feel comfortable is we'd have to sit down and make sure we understood all the resources at that point. And we'd have to walk through who would be on which teams, how much availability they would have versus their day-to-day job, and come look at that and line it up. So if you have a lot of overlap, then that means you've got a lot of responsibilities on each one of those bars for each of those projects. So if you can do that and you have enough time in the day to do that, that's great. If you don't, because I have to spend half or more than half of my day doing my day-to-day work, that's a different issue, because you still have to get the deliverables done for Tyler on the agreed-upon timeframe.
Mr. Buxton?
There's a lot going on in the discussion. It's important. The only thing in my packet was the memo. You stated at the beginning that this is for informational purposes only, correct? We won't be making a decision at the end of this conversation.
We've already made some decisions, but
What about this decision?
this decision's informational at this
Right.
point.
So is that a decision that this group will have to eventually make, or to follow a recommendation?
The contract we signed with Tyler is going to have a schedule in it, and so that's what's being shown as an alternative right now. And the reason it's changed is we have to recognize what our own resources are in here, and because once this contract gets signed, it has to be real clear. If we take that more aggressive tact, we have to dedicate our resources to that, to keep it on schedule. And if we don't, that becomes a big problem, a big cost burden, and then Tyler can't deliver on its product installation if we don't have the resources. And we have people that have other responsibilities, so we just can't carve them off and say, okay, for the next 2 years you're going to be doing this, because there's other work to be done. And that's really why it's the schedule's being altered the way it is.
I understand that, because that's what you stated at the beginning of the meeting. So I get that. But also heard that I'm not making a decision on this because I'd like to review those or have a clear understanding of what I'm voting on, and we're not doing anything like that tonight. Or are we approving the change? Or is there no choice for me to approve the change because it's an executive call?
Well, I think your input obviously is what we're looking for tonight. And twofold. Number one, meet our consultant, understand the scope of work that we're talking about, and if there's input direction that the Levy Court as a body wants to give, we will certainly incorporate that. But this meeting here is informational. There's no decisions made tonight.
I would just add, if we were looking to do a decision, we would probably give a lot more data to you in terms of information that you would have, in terms of this is what the state team looks like, this is kind of what the capacity. I didn't bring any of that because we haven't done that. We've just had high-level conversations, and the only thing we based this timeline off of versus theirs is our experience that we've had with Newcastle County. So that doesn't mean that you have to do anything that Newcastle County did. It was just a different set of eyes looking at the same thing. Their base plan was more aggressive than ours. Ours, we had to kind of change it in Newcastle County, and based on conversations with Kim and others, I would anticipate that would be the same here. I don't think you'd have the bandwidth to run that many initiatives in parallel and do the day-to-day things. Now, if you said that's what you wanted to do, that would be fine with us, but we would want to try to walk through that with you and supply names and positions and whatnot before we made any recommendation like that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Payne, as I say, we're going to be losing two of our directors, IT and financials. So the first two we're going to be talking about.
Right.
So because we don't know who we're going to get on board yet, it's the timeline. I don't know when the contract's going to get sold. But I know our staff, we have capable staff. I just want to make sure we don't burn them out or put them at a peril to where they can't do their regular job on top of what we're trying to do too. So we're going to need some help, I think, in that area. Just want to get it on the record because I think we have staff out here too.
Yes.
So,
And Kim's been very vocal about that in a good way, trying to be as forthright as possible in terms of what the art of the possible is, which I certainly appreciated because I had no insight to that. But at the end of the day, retirement in the public sector is something we're used to. I'm not saying it's easy. We have clients within the state, I won't say who it is, but they've got 60% of their staff is eligible for retirement over the 2.5 years of the project that we're doing. And so, you know, they had to take a look at a couple of options. One option was to not do anything and wait, try to get new staff hired, and postpone starting their initiative. The other was bringing in some of the new resources and using the project as a mechanism to try to get their knowledge up to where it's going to need to be to run the organization on a go-forward basis. So you could make a case for either one, but I would tell you, in either case, it's going to take a lot of work from the resources. So, you know, we could probably talk all night about those two options and the different pluses and minuses to each of them. We're fine either way. It's totally up to you and how you want to work it. In the case of the other client, what we did with them was say, we really need to put together a very good staffing turnover plan. So they actually had to go out and say, okay, we're going to need X number of kind of dual positions for a certain amount of time, knowing that folks are going to be retiring, and the planning there is by the time the project ends, and now some of the people are going to retire during the project, but when the project ends, we at least at the beginning of the project have people planned for who's going to be in those key seats. And so that's part of the planning. But I wouldn't argue with the concept of we want to wait a while, get people up to speed, and then get started. It's just technology generally doesn't get better as it's aged, but that doesn't mean that you're in crisis mode either. So, you know, it's kind of a decision that the county needs to decide which way it wants to go. We could help, you know, advise and all that, but at the end of the day, you have to decide how you want to handle those people challenges.
any other questions for Mr. Payne? Continue, please.
Sure. And if I'm going too slow or
No, you're doing
taking
fine.
too much time, please let me know. Okay. All right. Some of the measurements of success, things that are important. So we say vanilla implementation. When we're buying canned software, we're looking for a solution that, out of the box, basically does what you want it to do. And/or it has parameters that you can set within the boundaries of the system to get it to work the way you want it to work for you, as opposed to having to build custom code to do things for you. So Tyler is very well kind of used across the country and counties. And one of the reasons they are so popular is because it's geared towards government. They have best practices and workflows in the solution. And so our recommendation is, for the most part, try to make it as vanilla, meaning take what they give you, adjust your practices to go along with their best practices. That gets you done the quickest. And then anytime you have to do an upgrade, you don't have to spend the time trying to retrofit all the customizations that you have. So that's what we mean by staying with vanilla.
Sweeney?
Yes, sir.
The one project I keep bringing up here over the last 4 years, Kim, is the state's SAP project. And what happened to that? Because I was at OAS in charge of the data center when the SAP project was taking place up north, and the state's not using SAP anymore. They never even started using it.
Yeah, I can only talk to my own experience. When I joined DTI, they were in the middle of working on PeopleSoft.
Yep.
So I don't know what the SAP history was.
SAP was $65 million in the hole before they canned it and switched to PeopleSoft because of the not going with the vanilla implementation idea.
Yeah, I can talk to specifics in my old job with the state and also all the different clients that I work with today, which is why we feel very strongly about sticking to this. The minute you start customizing, you not only take longer for the initial project, you live with that forever.
Every update.
Now, everybody thinks they're special and everybody thinks they're different, but these software packages have kind of evolved pretty well over the years, and they've got a lot of parameters built into them that allow you to change things without having to customize it. So I can't sit here in front of you and guarantee that because I'm not that familiar with your structure yet, but I can tell you we're doing vanilla in Newcastle County. And so we've adjusted a couple business practices to work with it. Collaboration, again, that sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but this is all about the whole team working together, both the business people, the technical people, the vendor, everybody being on the same page, deliverables getting done on time, because everything has to be coordinated. So I just keep hitting that drum over and over again. That's super critical. Then organizational change management. We do a readiness study at the beginning, so we'll go around and look at all the different portions of the organization. Some will adapt a lot easier than others. And then based on that assessment, we decide how much time needs to be spent with that area to try to get them ready so when the system is turned on, they're ready to use it. Again, tracking the budget and time, they're totally related to each other. You spend more time, it costs more money. That's just the way it's going to be. That's once you say with Tyler, this is what it is. And it's not because Tyler's bad. That's the way any company was going to behave. That's why we got to make sure we can make our timeline that we agree to. And then the best practices, as I said, that kind of goes hand in hand with the vanilla implementation. They have a lot of best practices already built into the tool. And we were recommended to clients, let's adjust the way we do some things. We still have to provide all the services, we still have to follow all the regulations, but how we do it, we may adjust the way that works. Assumptions and risks. Big assumption here, stop me if this sounds familiar, but the ability to allocate the resources to work on the initiative is super critical. The risk is all about kind of the project plan and the scope. So we will do our job if you ask us to participate in terms of keeping things within the scope. We'll have a change management structure. So if there is a change, whether it's the timeline or the scope of we need something else, whatever, that would be presented through the change process to a committee. I don't know if it's this committee or exactly how you want it set up as the county, but it would be something that would come to a group and they would be voted on and agreed to before we went and did anything. So the project team's just not off doing whatever they want to do. It is multiple layered governance structure. Questions? I know that was kind of high level, but hopefully it was informative.
So during the process, if something comes up that we need to change, or
Yep.
it's like in construction, they have a place where you go back and you have to go back and.
Yes.
And is that something that will be in the?
Yes.
Okay.
So any large IT project that we oversee, we have a predefined change management process. And not organizational change management. That's like how you adapt your organization to the tool. This is change management, meaning you change the scope, you change the timeline,
Change
there's
the
a price. Any of those things can't just be okayed by the project manager. It has to go through a predefined governance structure that then gets either okayed or, said no, and then has to be brought back to and work through with the vendors.
Ms. Benamon?
Commissioner Angel. Thank you, Commissioner Angel. Matt, right now we're in engagement for the negotiation on the contract, and you presented some of those highlights tonight. How close are we to being able to present a contract to Levy Court for its consideration?
Well, we provided some feedback that we spoke about. I think the big thing, what I believe we really need to do is lay out a resource plan of people, lay it out across those teams that we saw in kind of the timeline, and try to reach some consensus, if that can be done.
And a proposed project timeline.
Yeah, so those two will
Everyone
go hand in
agree?
hand. The
Mhm.
people, can they keep up with the proposed timeline as best we can work together and make that assessment? Again, it's not just IT, it's the business side as
Right.
well. If we get everybody on board with that, I don't think it'll take, a long time to negotiate the rest of the contract. I think there's more work to be put into that particular part of the exercise.
So what needs to happen? I hear what we need to have in it, but I mean, how do we get it to a point? And when do you think we could get it to a point? We approved months ago the selection of Tyler ERP.
Right.
And, but we have not advanced it to a contract, and that's what we're talking about, right? Getting it to a contract.
So depending on the availability
3 months out, 2 months out, a month out, how far out are we?
Depending on the county's availability, I think we could probably do 2 or 3 working sessions between the business and the IT groups and try to lay out the plan and, name the key resources and have that discussion.
And data conversion is another discussion to be
Data conversion's a
had.
big deal.
How many years are we looking for? It's just.
Are you willing, do you need to keep the old data? And is that gonna be view only? Is there utility you need to read that? So we're big proponents of, the minute we put something new in, we like to put away the old, so you're not paying for both. Sometimes people like to keep older systems even after the new system's up for a certain amount of time for someone's level of comfort or whatever.
Right.
We're not really big proponents of that. We're kind of, you kind of moved from this car, you moved into that car. Now we got to deal with the new car and make the new car work. You got the old car, people keep going back to the old car, so.
Mr. Buxton?
And thank you for the presentation, a lot of good information. I like what Mike's stating about it's a good time, we need to get there though. Like, this Levy Court's been at this for quite a while.
Okay.
So it's a good time to try and get there. We're excited. I'm a little disappointed that the timeline's so far off. It is what it is. Does that timeline change? You said it delays, or the longer it takes, the more costly it is. Is that relevant in the conversation of what the?
Well, I think what we need to do is kind of go under what's the art of the possible. So, what resources do we have? I don't have a lot of, right now, I don't have a lot of insight, almost none on the business side.
Right.
I have a little bit from working with Kim and some folks on her team. So again, my best guess is we probably need about 3 sessions to sit down, go through the resources, and then we can put a plan together of staffing. That will then lead to the timeline.
Who's gonna work on
And the timeline
it?
will lead to the cost from.
Who's going to work on it? How many hours a day can they commit? That type thing.
Exactly.
Within
Named resources.
Right. Within IT, we do have about 3 people that we could put on this project. We have Donna Barnes, who currently handles all of the systems that we're looking to replace with Tyler. She also has a programmer that works for her. He can be available. And the technology administrator can be available come March. She's currently working on MGO. So we do have resources within IT that can be available for the project. And I think we just need to outline who on the business side would be available and committed and have X number of hours, and so that we can make sure that the project timeline is in line with our resources.
So the reason I said 3, just by the way, is probably 1 IT focused, 1 business, and then overlap the 2 of them, bring it together. That's kind of why I was saying 3.
Is there any merit, and this is just out in left field, in bringing some of the brains that are leaving back into?
So that's a great recruiting strategy. We've done that in many places that we've worked in. There have been people that have retired that have, particular areas of expertise. And we've absolutely done that in the past in some places, has brought some folks back in that really understand how the place works, both business and IT.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you for making this as painless as possible.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Matt.
Any public comments on this one item? Any public comments? Anybody online, Mark?
If there's anyone joining us online that would like to make comments on this item, please press *3 or raise your hand, and we will let you into the meeting. See no hands raised online.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The Administration Committee has adjourned. The Community Services Committee, Mr. Sweeney, Chair, turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the first issue or the first agenda item, Chaseland Hills, Mr. Pettidemonge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Strine is with us, and Andy, if you'd like to join us at the table. While Mr. Strine's coming down, just real briefly, the Chaseland Hills subdivision was approved in 2005.
Good to see you.
And some of you may recall this development. It was somewhat controversial when it was first proposed. It's just south of Magnolia. Mark, if you can go to the next slide. Right along Clapham Road, you see Clapham Road running north-south. And the subdivision, which is not built today, that's Sophers Row, the road that kind of veers off to the left at the bottom. So this property sits at the corner of Sophers Row and Clapham Road, just south of the town of Magnolia. And back in 2005, when this proposal was put forward, the developer at the time offered a couple of different things as ways to address some of the public concerns with development. One, there was a significant dedication of land to the fire company, which is to the north of this image here. And another was a dedication of 2 acres of land to the county for a future library location, because at the time the county was looking at, we were in the old Camden Library and we were getting ready to terminate a lease there, and the county was in the hunt for a property for a library. So the developer offered 2 acres. The county accepted that 2 acres, and that little postage stamp property there that's outlined in red is the location of the 2 acres. Again, the internal road system doesn't exist today. It's a field, but Mr. Strine's about ready to embark on this development. And about 2 months ago, he contacted me and said, look, is the county still going to build a library here, or you got interest in this property? Because it's, you know, it's been titled to us. And talked to leadership and talked to our folks in community services, and no, there's no plan to put a library there. So we began a dialogue about this property getting turned back to the developer to be consumed as part of the open space. And so Mr. Strine's put forward a proposal to essentially purchase the property from the county. It's in your packet. And at this point, I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Strine and let him continue the proposal. Andy?
Sure. Thank you for the time. So as Mr. Pettidemonge outlined, there's this kind of outlier parcel that was originally platted or thought was going to be a library. Obviously, you guys have since built one on the other side of the county. And when we're sort of finalizing the plan from a DelDOT standpoint, they were trying to figure out traffic counts and saying, hey, you're going to have a library here at some point. I'm like, well, I don't think they're going to build another library because they've already built one. And they said, well, you know, we need to know what's going to happen with this in terms of traffic generation. It's 2 acres that you know, if the county had another use for it, that'd be great. We'd be fine with whatever you all wanted to do with it. It didn't seem like there was a logical use, and there was not really a need. So kind of just to clean things up, we offered to buy the parcel. We provided some comps. There's actually an adjacent parcel to this piece of ground that traded within the last 6 or 9 months, I think, that was around $10,000 an acre. We just used that as the price point for this. We committed to not subdividing it or developing it or doing anything to add additional units. Frankly, we were figuring we'd put a dog park there that would just be an added amenity for the subdivision. It's only really accessible from the interior roads once it's built. So it kind of wants to be part of the community because the traffic's going to come in and out of there. And we didn't really want to do anything that was going to change the traffic or increase traffic to the community. So it would really just be open space dedicated to the HOA and used by the folks in the community. And again, we just tried to come up with what a fair market price was based on a relatively recent and extremely adjacent sales comparable. So.
Andy, thanks for being here. First of all, Happy New Year. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, good to see you.
What's the property that's surrounding it on three sides? What's that being used for?
It's either stormwater management along Clapham Road. I believe there's stormwater management along Surfers Row, and then there's just some open space. I don't know if there's wetlands down in the corner that's off the bottom that you can't really see. But it's all, all the big parcels that aren't obviously single-family home lots is common area, stormwater,
Right.
open space, or wetlands.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Petitmange or Mr. Strine?
And I think in the letter of intent, we basically said, there's no contingencies. I'm not quite sure. We can do a simple real estate land contract. I think the bigger question is how do you guys convey it? From our end, it's pretty simple. But you'd probably want to talk to council, and I don't know who signs a deed when the county sells something or who.
Convey it in pennies.
What's that?
We're going to convey it in pennies.
Well, you tell me how you want to do it, if you want to do it. It just seems like an easy way to kind of clean up something that, we were not the original developers from this. We actually bought it from First National Bank of Wyoming that took it back when, everything kind of collapsed in 07, 08, 09. So we inherited what was there. And now, the market's in a different point than it was a dozen years ago or so. And it's, we're kind of looking to move ahead and figured we could clean up this thing versus having this 2-acre parcel that nobody knows who's supposed to mow it and when and what they're supposed to do with it and whatnot. So that's kind of how we got here.
Mr. Petitmange.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a motion in the memo that was sent to you, and the motion would accept the proposed price of $10,000 an acre for $20,000. And if you do approve that, that could occur next week at business meeting, either on consent agenda or by action, and then the actual settlement would be handled by our county attorney. And to answer your question, Andy, the president of Levy Court signs on behalf of the county for any transfers or purchases of property. So that's basically it. The comparable that was provided was a larger property. It was appraised at a little over 11,000 an acre. But the difference here, I think, is that this property will be permanent open space. And so the developer here, Mr. Strine, is offering the county $20,000 for land that was given to us several years ago. And the motion would suggest that if you do accept it, that the money be deposited in the Parkland Reserve Fund for future improvements to our parks system.
It hasn't been deeded to us yet, has it? It has already?
Yep.
Any other questions? Move this forward to consent agenda next week.
Not voting.
So no consent agenda, new business.
Business?
I won't oppose consent agenda. If that's doable.
Consent agenda has to be unanimous, doesn't it? That's new business. New business.
New business?
Yep.
Okay.
Would I need to come to the next meeting, or you'll let me know what, where, how, and when? If okay, great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate your patience on this.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Yep.
Mr. Shepherd, as you guys know, we approved RC airplane permitting in our parks, and Mr. Shepherd agreed to come back on an annual basis and give us an update.
Evening, Commissioners. Mr. Petitmange. So, Jody is correct in saying that I'm here just to present my annual report on remote control airplane permitting in county parks. Back in 2019, we approved basically a permitting process to allow people to come to us, give us some information, AMA card or FAA card, and we give them permission to fly a remote control airplane in 3 of Kent County's parks, one being Big Oak, the other Kessel Ring, and the third one, Browns Branch County Park. Our list has grown. As you look on page 2, we now have approximately 10 RC permits out. This is only for 2021. I have issued a new permit already for 2022, so that list may grow. Also, a few of these, I think like maybe, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are actually renewals too. So we do have some people that are just continuing to do so. I can say without a doubt, I have not had one complaint from the public, call, email, what have you, about the use of these RC airplanes in the parks. And the great majority of them, as far as I know, is happening at Kessel Ring. So we do kind of see what's happening out there. They're very respectful. Again, they're flying light airplanes, which means they're usually foam, electric motors, so you don't have the loud, so it really is pretty non-invasive, all things considered. Haven't had to go out and warn anybody about the way they're flying, whether they're flying overhead buildings, overhead of people, what have you. So I think overall it's been a very positive addition to our parks at this point. I don't see any immediate concern. That's my report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Pepper?
Yeah, I think this is what, the 3rd year you've done this?
Yes, sir.
And you haven't had any problems?
Yes, sir.
And it's limited amount of folks that are actually getting permits and everything. I really question as to whether if we really need to have him come every year. I mean, he don't do a report on how many kids are playing soccer or how many kids are playing basketball or anything like that. So it's a pretty smoothly run process, and I really don't think that we really need to have him come in here again to report on this unless there's a problem. So.
Agree. That's procedural, so Jeremy, you don't have to do the same one. Thanks.
Heavy load, Val. We're lightening your plate.
Yeah.
But I do agree. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Any other questions for Mr. Shepherd? Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate you coming out for the last time. Thanks, seeing you all. Any public comments on either of these issues? Any public comments? Mark, anybody online?
I see no hands raised online.
Thank you. Closed committee. Back to you, Mr. Pepper.
Thank you. That adjourns the Community Services Committee. The next one is Finance Committee. Mrs. Maston, the chair. Turn over to you, ma'am.
Okay, the first item on our agenda, the only item, is the Wyoming Park Inclusive Playground Project, Policy 30 grant request. Mr. Pettit-Devange?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Yes, you received in your packet this weekend information regarding the Inclusive Playground Project that's planned for Wyoming Park, and we have some representatives joining us from the town of Wyoming. Just say that this proposal came to the office through Commissioner Sweeney, and it does qualify for the Community Projects Contributions Fund, or Policy 30 funding that we have set aside for non-county owned capital projects. And if you look through the materials that were in your packet, you'll see pretty impressive plans for this playground. And the town has successfully secured some state funding, and they're seeking county participation along with that. And I'll stop there. I'll turn the floor over to our representatives from town of Wyoming. Good evening. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank the County Council for giving us the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Steve Bilber. I am the mayor of Wyoming. This project came about to me. I am a special education teacher in the Cesar Riding School District. I work at John S. Charlton, a school with kids with exceptionalities, as I call them. One of the big things that I saw when I started teaching is that there's just not a lot of playground space within the county for our student population to be included, in activities. When I took over as mayor of Wyoming, that was one of the grounds that I stood on, was that I wanted to revamp our park, and I wanted to have an all-inclusive section to that park so that anybody could come and participate. If you run a pavilion, you have a birthday party, and you got a son or a daughter that's in a wheelchair, they can be included as well. When we started the project initially, we have 2 parcels of playground equipment there, one for bigger kids, one for smaller kids. The idea is that we were going to put a section that was all-inclusive in the center. As we started meeting with representatives from different companies, they said, listen, your playground equipment's probably 15 years old already. The shelf life on that kind of stuff is 20 years. If you start now and come back and tear this stuff up later, it's going to cost you more money to redo it. So then we decided we would overhaul the entire park, or at least the entire playground. So the idea is to remove all the playground equipment that we have there now, install all new equipment, a nice rubber floor. It's all inclusive, all ADA compliant. We just put up new bathroom facilities, so to be ADA compliant with the, to the bathroom facilities, to the street. And just giving not only kids from, not only kids from our community, but the surrounding communities as well, a place to come and enjoy themselves. So.
Commissioner comments?
Yep. First of all, Mayor Bilbro, thanks for being here. Thanks for dragging Andre Lindell, your clerk of the council, with you. I have had a lot of communications back and forth with you, and you hit this nail right on the head. This is not just the one. We've done a lot of projects with this funding that we provide, and they've been projects that were focused for the town. A park in the town, a dog park in the town, a clock in the town. This park is going to provide services for the whole county, if not farther, because I can't think of another all-inclusive playground that's in Delaware right now.
Milford and Glasgow.
So those are the distances that families with children with disabilities would have to travel in order to get them onto a playground. So if we were going to do this on our own, we would be doing much more than your ask. I know it's a big ask, but, thanks for being here, and we appreciate what you guys are doing.
Other commissioner comments?
Yeah.
Commissioner Buxton?
And thanks guys for being here, and it's a wonderful project, fantastic. And Mayor, I had a chance to talk to you about this, and I said, please don't take things personal, but as I tend to do, I'll do it again. My concern, right, first of all, Mr. Pettit-Demage, the level of funding currently that exists is pretty high in that budget, in that item.
It could withstand this amount for sure.
What's in there right now?
I don't have the exact amount, but it's over 600.
Sorry about that. Didn't want to put you on the spot. So clearly we can afford it. So that's not the point, right? The concern I have is the precedent it set. It's unparalleled in what we've been giving in the past. Is that fair? It exceeds
most, yes.
Quite extensively.
Yes.
And in the past, we've always said a couple of things. Well, I've always stated, number one, I need a match from the town, which you're indicating the town itself is putting forth a clear match, which is impressive, right? But then typically we've tried to target something to control or manage the cost, because what's going to happen now is that what you've done, which is fantastic, I would suspect, because of the grant process that's out there with the state, is going to begin to get matched. And so that's my only concern moving forward. Maybe not tonight. And maybe I'm just off base, but a concern, at what level number do we exceed what our partnership should be? It's not for tonight's discussion. I don't see anybody opposing this, and I'm not going to fall on a sword. But I will be concerned that the number's pretty high comparative to what we've done in the past for future.
Yeah, Commissioner Buxton, I can't disagree with that. I was concerned, and I had this conversation earlier with another commissioner about the dollar amount, because the others, I think, at least when I've been here the last year, it's ran somewhere between $30,000 to maybe $50,000 has been what we've asked for a match from. So I'm a little concerned about the $100,000 and the precedent that we would be setting.
I will say this, and the reason that we don't have any rules Really, we're just kind of flying. So you haven't broken a rule, we're not breaking a rule to get there. And the benchmark for me has always been the town and it's just me, their match. Like, if they're coming in with zero, I got to adjust. But so, if we want to address that down the road, yeah, would be willing to hear about it.
Commissioner Angel?
Yes, thank you. Well, the estimated cost is $500,000. The 2 grants you're getting from the state is $300,000. $100,000 from us, we make it $400,000. So does that mean you guys are putting up $100,000 or doing a fundraiser?
So this is where we're at as far as the funding, and it can be spun a couple different ways because we all know how financials work. So this DENREC gave us a $150,000 grant. Last year, when every municipality in the state of Delaware was given $150,000 from the bond bill, we chose to spend that money from our bond bill on this park. So I could say, listen, I'll take that $150,000 from the bond bill, I'll backfill that in my general budget, and I'll take money from my general budget and we'll put $150,000 forward. At that point, we're just, playing a game. What was given to us, we are putting at the bare minimum $150,000 forward. I expect it's probably going to be $250,000 is what we will end up spending.
And the reason I'm bringing this up too is, before I was a sitting commissioner, RecNOC had a playground, but it had to go out and raise funds. Is that correct, Mr. Pettermaj? Do you remember that?
The creative playground, which is
the playground.
Piccadilly. You talking about Piccadilly Castle?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a little different project, but there was it was a big community effort. There was donated resource. I wasn't here at the time. I think there was architectural services that were paid for by the county, but part of the program was to bring in volunteer help, professional volunteer. I mean, a lot of contractors and people donated materials, and there were a lot of things like that were at play. I was not with the county at the time, but I do remember when that project happened, and there was a company that was selling those creative playgrounds around the country.
Well, I know Mr. Vernon, who was one of the ones that helped get that started, was the fundraiser for that. So,
and I would say, if I could add, one of the big differences, we're sitting here and we're talking about $500,000 for a playground. It seems to be expensive. If you've ever been to a playground and you've had an individual that's in a wheelchair and you try and push them across one of those mulch beds, it's not happening. So this playground here, the majority of the cost, not the majority, but a large portion of the cost is going to be to a floor, a foundation, someplace that somebody in a wheelchair can easily access it. They don't have to have somebody to try and force them across it. They can glide across it themselves. And that's what's driving the cost of this up. And we looked at a number of different things that we could, try and do to save money there. But at the end of the day, it's going to limit, it's going to restrict access to individuals.
Commissioner Hall?
Yeah, and that's, I think what's got me sold on this is that you said that this would be the only one between Milford and Glasgow.
Yep.
And it's not just swings and sliding boards. It's driving the cost.
Yep.
And I think you've done a good job of finding partners, weaving some money together here. So it is a large ask, but it's also a very unusual project in that it's inclusive, not just renovating an existing playground or installing just regular run-of-the-mill equipment. So I have no problems with this.
Commissioner Pepper?
The other thing that we're overlooking too, this is going to be a playground. It's going to be used by pretty much the entire county.
Yep.
And you've got to consider the value of the land that the town is pretty much donating to the county to be able to build this on. So I think you've done a good job of matching funds.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just,
Mr. Buxton?
it's not. It's just basically to defend how it got here. And basically say yes to the project. It's precedent setting in two ways. The cost and the ask, but it's impressive precedent setting in your vision and what you've now created for the town of Wyoming. And the point I make is that it's so good that I would suggest others will follow, which is nothing wrong with that. Or maybe they'll be creative in other angles. And so the only conversation I had at the very beginning was just to say that moving forward, be cautious, although, maybe not. We've got enough money, maybe not. But it was not about
I understand,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's not
Yeah,
about
the
that.
project is a good project, because living in District 1, I've had people comment to me about Big Oak. It's not friendly for people that are handicapped. So, I mean, I commend you for the work that you put forth. I'm not worried about the project, I was just concerned about the ask, because it was abnormal to what we were accustomed to.
Hey, I had a question for
Mr.
you.
Buxton?
This is a little off topic, but those grants that you accessed, are we able to access them?
Are we able to access them? The ORPT grant, yes. In fact, Mr. Shepard frequently, almost annually gets ORPT grant money for Browns Branch. We have a sprinkler project going in right now that's being paid partially by that.
Something to look at. And
Yeah, we
the
do
county to
those.
consider.
The other grant that they got was from the bond bill, and,
Yeah.
and that was a nice offer that the state made there as well.
Question, the ARPA money, some of that is allowed to go for infrastructure?
Yes.
Could we use part of that money for, not for this project, but for similar projects? Because this is infrastructure, for sure.
Well,
Recreational infrastructure.
the ARPA limits infrastructure spending to sewer, water, and broadband.
Okay.
Whether or not as a qualified public outdoor recreation element, because there's also talk in ARPA about park development.
Yeah.
To get people outside during the pandemic, so they get recreation. That'd be something that we would probably want to run by our consultant to see if it would be possible or not. I can't answer the question.
Yeah, let's do that, run that by them once they get on board and see if that's a possibility, because I think that's a worthwhile projects, outdoor playgrounds, outdoor activities, especially since, our country's getting fatter. I think it's,
Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. You
did I
were
hurt your
talking to
feelings?
me.
Did I hurt your feelings? But let's look at that and get them to look at to make a determination whether or not we can use for outdoor activities like that. We've been talking about a project up along railroad tracks.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. See if we can
Well, let me,
access some of that.
if I may ask a question of the representatives, did you all receive ARPA funding?
Yes, we did. So we checked, they came out with this thing where they kind of forced the municipalities' hands and went on board with an attorney for a percentage of our ARPA funds. So anyway, we did that, and they're supposed to give us guidance. And they came back and we asked about this, and they said, no, you cannot use this, for the park. It was kind of, we thought that it could be used in a number of different ways. And this here was prior to the federal government's final ruling that just came out.
Yeah.
That was about a week prior to that. So, we've asked that we reach back out to the law firm that's consulting with us and just check with them again, like, hey, the final ruling's come out. Has anything changed?
Yeah.
But the initial answer that we were given was no.
Okay.
Mr. Angel, you had a question?
Yes, I did. Well, first of all, I've had a nephew that went through Charlton School, so I'm very familiar with the school. When you start talking about playgrounds for special needs, the price quadruples because of safety.
Yep.
I already know that. Having become handicapped myself, I've learned how much things cost when you have to go have things done. So I know it's a lot of money, but when I'm sitting here thinking, I'm listening to all the comments, I mean, that's really, if you were going to do something like that indoors, it'd be even more.
It would.
So I have no problem with.
Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you. So I would ask that we move forward with the amount and then ask Mr. Petitdemange to contact Tetra Tech to see if they would look at this, to see if it's possible to use from our ARP funds. If not, use the Prop 30 funds.
Show of hands for consent agenda for next week?
Consent agenda? Or
Public, new business.
Yeah, new business.
I'm sorry.
Rather see it.
consent agenda would be?
Yeah.
No.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
business agenda.
Okay.
CR,
New business.
New business.
CR built outdoor volleyball courts with COVID money.
Yeah.
I don't know what the
Yeah.
difference is.
I don't know if they're held to different,
Skulls, maybe.
yeah.
Traveling league.
Audrey, Steve, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
You really twisted our arms, I'm telling you.
Yeah, Audrey.
Sorry.
Hey, you,
Listen, just trying to make it a better place, that's all.
Armina?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
Whether or not there's agreement. If everyone
Okay.
agrees to put it on consent, it's kind of like they've already approved it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Public comments. Public comments.
Any public comment? Finance Committee is adjourned.
Thank you, ma'am. Planning Services Committee, Mr. Buxton, Chair. Turn over to you, sir.
I believe we have a couple visitors that might, or at least one. Sarah, you going to stay up there? All righty.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Hey there, how you doing?
Mr. Pettit-Demonge. Doing, Mike. Okay, tonight I come before you for the second time in a number of months to seek approval on a housing rehabilitation bid, which was above the $25,000 threshold. This particular job contract came in, the bidder price, the low bid price was $39,977, which is just shy of our threshold amount of $40,000 that we can spend on a stick-built house. This particular home needs a lot of work. This particular home has a lot of lead, which increased the costs associated with the rehabilitation. When a particular job, due to HUD guidelines, if there's a particular job that's above $25,000, you have to do a full lead abatement, just as opposed to a renovation and repair. So that cost factors into this as well.
Pipe? Lead pipe?
What's that?
Lead pipe?
No, this is paint.
Oh, lead paint.
Yes.
Okay.
House is quite full of lead paint. I think when they when we sent the inspection team out to do the assessment, they tested 87 areas and 31 of those came back what we call hot, which is lead over a certain percentage, and that has to be addressed. Yes.
Mike, is there a bucket of money that this funding comes from? And what's the balance in that for the year?
Well, basically what we do is we apply with the Housing Authority annually. We base that on target areas which we have to have approved by the Housing Authority. Right now we're in fiscal year 19, which we're going through pretty rapidly. We had a hard time getting through fiscal year 18, but so far, as of December 31st, for our funds obligated, we're over 50% of what we were awarded. We were awarded $683,000. Well, actually, we were awarded $120,000 more than the number that I'm going to give you, which we had to give back to the Housing Authority. If you recall, we spoke about this October a year ago,
Right.
Which left us with a funding amount of $683,400. Right now, we've got roughly $354,000 under contract already. So basically, if this job for nearly $40,000 gets approved, that's considered funds obligated once the contract's signed. So we're moving through fiscal year 19 pretty rapidly. We've started to take applications for fiscal year 20. We don't have as much funding for fiscal year 20. We only have $260,000. And that was due to the other COVID money that we were not going to use. So we allocated back to the Housing Authority for their usage with the hotel motel voucher program. So I can see us getting through fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 pretty rapidly.
Who initiates a request for a housing rehab?
Generally, folks call in.
The homeowner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The word of mouth travels pretty well. So we get a bunch of intake from people calling us in that then they thereby go on our waiting list. Depending if they're in a certain target area, depending on what their tax status is, things of that nature, then we just work those guys through. So they'll get on the waiting list, and then our team will go out and make contact with them, do initial inspection, take an application, and then we put those jobs out to bid.
Mr. Miles, is there any property taxes owed against this property?
This house, no.
that was-
At least there wasn't at the time of the application. And generally, I would assume that our guy wouldn't have put this out to bid if there were any taxes owed on it, I'm sorry.
They're not eligible for that. Typically, they're not eligible for this
Wouldn't make it this far.
without it.
And I will check that once, just to be sure. Unless that's already been done.
No, I was
Okay.
curious, because I know the previous one you talked about was a mobile home.
Yes.
Spending a lot of money on it, but you had indicated property taxes were owed on that. And the only reason I question it, because when I was mayor of Smyrna, there was a
Okay.
property in town that needed some work badly. This was when Mark Jacobs was here.
Okay.
And one of the criteria was property taxes could not be owed.
Yes.
Because if property taxes are owed, then they didn't qualify for CBDG money. So the prior meeting, when you talked about the mobile home, I think you indicated it was like $10,000 in back taxes.
Yes.
So that's why that was the first question came to mind here. We're pumping all this money into properties, but they already owe us tax money. How's that work?
It's like the clean hands policy kind of. We're not going to do work on your home if you owe taxes.
And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, so generally what we do when folks have a tax balance, we ask them to either get it paid off quickly or, get with finance department, get on a payment plan.
Understood.
And then once they make consistent payments over a certain amount of time, if the finance department decides that we can go ahead and take an application, then that's
Understood.
on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I had spoken to you not too long ago about the potential for burning through some of trying to play catch up a little bit
Correct.
and hire maybe kind of an outsider to come in and assist in burning down some of the applications because there's quite so many. You indicated that wasn't going to be effective, had something to do with the federal regulations.
Well, basically what, I guess, if Levy Court decided that they wanted to hire another position, housing rehab specialist position.
I just wanted to hire, like we kind of did in planning, somebody on the outside to come in and assist you to play catch up.
Well, you would have to train that individual. And I think the only way the Housing Authority would, basically for FY '22, I'm applying for $50,000 more in administration funds.
Sure.
And that would, by virtue, if we could get another person hired, that money would become effective 7/1/22.
And it's because we've kind of, and again, your effort's been outstanding. It's a tall task with a lot of applications, and the goal is if we have this money that's been sitting there, and the only thing that's keeping us from getting it out there is we just can't keep up. Essentially, we don't have enough staffing, is to provide assistance. But my injection was just now, an immediate one to say, right now, this second, are we getting them out there? Sounds like no matter what, we have a plan in place down the road to help you, so, which is good. Any other comments, questions? Is this something we can just move to consent? Move to consent, okay, show of hands. Hey, thanks for coming back in.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you very
great
much. Have a good night.
project. Thank you. Public comments. Anyone out there public comments. Anyone on the telephone land?
I see no hands raised online.
They're missing out. I think G. Howe?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Public Works Committee, Commissioner Howe, turn over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll have Ms. Gold come up here and tell us all about the force main punch and run to Rising Sun. She's going to illumine us. And I told her to keep it under 2 hours, so.
It's perfect for you.
Huh?
It's perfect for you.
Yeah. You too, buddy.
This is a project that we've talked about a couple different times. It's the sewer is being relocated outside of the US 13 right-of-way. Essentially, we're replacing the pipe with a new pipe. With that, we talked with Levy Court going back to October 2020. In January of 2021, we filed a notice of intent for funding, and we applied for those funds in a loan application. And DENREC was receptive, and we received a loan offer on December 30th, 2021. The loan is for $6,894,015. It's a term of 20 years and an interest rate of 2%. And we're requesting that that Levy Court accept DENREC's offer to fund the relocation of that 30-inch PCCP pipe.
Commissioner Sweeney raised his hand. I don't know if he wants to make a comment or he wants to donate the 6.8 million. Which is it?
Let's go with that.
Okay.
So Diana, this is also the area for DelDOT's expansion to 3 lanes from Punch and Run down to Woodside. How is this going to be impacted when they start that project?
This is that part of that project.
So why is DelDOT not paying for this?
So there's about 1,800 feet that we're looking into, that DelDOT was receptive in terms of paying for that, but they're not paying for the entire project. So, and that's also in the front page of the memo. At the time, and this goes back away to 2020, DelDOT was interested in paying for part of it related to that work, but it was only 1,800 feet that was deemed part of their project. We actually did part of the design, and for what we were looking at the time, there were a lot of pipe conflicts. There wasn't enough right-of-way to fit our pipe in for where we were looking at when we were looking at minimizing the project. We were just looking at doing a small section of it. Essentially, we're now looking at going from Punch and Run all the way down to Route 10. The DelDOT contribution at the time, and like I said, I'm going to have to go back and verify this because this goes back to 2020, we were looking at $3.6 to $4 million. For the portion that we're looking at for the county, we're looking at that 6.8 million. So this is a significant project.
So 6.8 of ours, or
and potentially
up to 4
from them.
$10 million for this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be impacted after they get their plans in place. But this
We're
is part of it.
working on it with them.
Okay.
We're working on it with Century Engineering, who is also working on the DelDOT project.
Okay. All
So
right.
it's highly coordinated.
Thanks.
I forgot to ask you, when does this start? The project we're talking about right here.
Like I said, we're in a design phase now. It really comes down to DelDOT having enough money to do their project.
Mm-hmm.
But the sewer piece and relocating the utilities is usually one of the first phases.
Okay, and how long would that take?
Usually with any engineering project with the piping, for us, a project is usually 12 months to 18
Okay.
months.
Okay, just general idea.
And the Glenn just asked one of the questions I was going to ask you, but the other one would be all the folks who pay sewer that are on the different sewer districts are going to be paying this about $7 million back, right?
including the contract users. So it's the district users and the contract users. All users will be paying back the loan.
At 2% with the amount we have today on the sewer, about how much additional do you think each district would be paying?
I'd have to go back and take a look at that, but we'll be meeting soon.
Because there would be an increase.
Not necessarily for this specific project, but the combination of additional loans that we may need to be doing our projects, it all becomes a cumulative effect and has an effect on the sewer rate. So does the addition of new customers that are paying debt service also affects the rate. So I can take a look at that when I'm meeting with you all. I'll be meeting with you all in February on the sewer fund budget and can talk about that.
That'd be interesting to know based on the amount of folks we're paying in today. What would the additional rate be?
Right, so there's also, like, the last project we did at the plant was a $23 to $24 million project. The biosolids project that we're getting ready to do is another $24 million. So it's a combination, it's not just a single loan, it's a combination of all the loans and future loans that we're going to be getting goes into that rate.
So, but there's no real start date yet? And so we don't really know when this would be completed.
I mean, originally, I think that this was supposed to be completed by November of 2022, but we haven't, it's not started. So, you know, in terms of schedule, in terms of engineering and DelDOT and getting the easements, sometimes it makes it hard to determine.
Gotcha. But it's not starting tomorrow.
It's not starting tomorrow.
All right, any other questions or comments? Mike?
Just a comment. Whenever we get an opportunity like this to relocate a force main out of a divided highway, we ought to take it because it's an investment for the future. But if you think about some of the roads we've been down when we've had force mains break in Route 13, it's really a problem and it's very costly repair work, and I think this is money well spent to get that major force main out of Route 13. Because DelDOT, if we say we're just go ahead and build over it, we'd probably be sitting over or underneath a travel lane where the force main is today, and we don't want that. I don't think that's in anyone's best interest. So I think it'd be a great move to advance this project. Thank you.
And I would add on to what the county administrator says. Not only is the travel lane, it becomes the controls for the lights. It's all the electronics, the other utilities. It builds up a lot of conflicts, and those are expensive to deal with when you're dealing with a force main break.
Yeah.
One other question. If we were to slip line that whole section, say we weren't relocating the lines, we were to have to slip line that whole distance, and DelDOT wasn't widening the roads, et cetera, what would that cost, basically, roughly?
I don't have a cost for that, but in order to...
Based on what the north cost, how much was that to go north?
That was, what, $700 a lineal foot?
It was over $5 million.
Yeah.
For $5 million, so it'd be probably close to the same amount. So...
But the other piece is you'd have to build a bypass, because when you slip line it, none of the wastewater can be in that pipe.
Yeah, so but when we do this, these modifications, we're still not going to have a bypass, right?
We're still not going to have a bypass, but we'll have a pipe of a brand new age. It's similar to when we slip line the pipe. Basically, that gives us an interior pipe that's brand new.
Right.
So we're sort of starting over at that point with new pipe, whether it's lined or whether it's pipe built in a different location.
Right.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, now for the consent agenda. 7 up. All right. Any comments from anybody? Our massive audience or on the phone?
Seems like no one's interested in this topic.
Commentary from Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah.
All righty, back to you, Mr. President.
Okay, that adjourns the Public Works Committee. At this time, we'll adjourn the committee meeting and go into the workshop. We're going to do the workshop here at caucus room. Caucus room. Okay. We're going to our workshop for the FY23 budget review, community service grants. We'll be going to our caucus room for that. So we are adjourned to the caucus room.
Thank you. And I'd hate to be in charge of that, though.
Hey, Robert. Hey, Dean, how are you? All right, how are you? Good, thanks. This is a public meeting we're going into tomorrow. You want to come?